The Last of Us Part 2 has divided the gaming community like few games have before. Some people loved the direction the developers took for the sequel, but others really didn't like it. And, well, some think it's all just social justice warrior propaganda. For all those of you who don't know what we are talking about, let us catch up really quickly with the most important stuff. Those of you who still want to play the games, you might want to come back to this video after you finished it, because we'll certainly have lots of spoilers in this episode. The Last of Us tells the story of Joel, a middle-aged man, and Ellie, a teenager, in the post-apocalyptic world roamed by different kinds of zombies. Since the outbreak of a fungus infection which zombifies people, the world has gone to hell and the government in the United States has been overthrown by the military. By the way, the fungus infection actually exists in the real world and is scary as hell. It really does kind of zombify insects such as ants. Anyway, Joel, who lost his own daughter in the very beginning of the apocalypse, had a rough and quite criminal life ever since, until he ends up in one of the military quarantine zones. There, he works as a smuggler for different people and organizations, one of them being a paramilitary group called the Fireflies. The Fireflies are in constant struggle with a military group that controls various quarantine zones. Ellie, who grew up in the post-apocalyptic world, was bitten by a zombie when she was a younger teenager. But instead of turning into a zombie herself, nothing happened to her. The leader of the Fireflies, MacLeod, tasked Joel and his companion Tess with smuggling Ellie across the country to the headquarters of the Fireflies. There, a doctor has the prospect of developing a vaccine for the fungus infection. And so, their story begins and Joel and Ellie reach the hospital after crossing half the country and killing hundreds of people and zombies alike. At the hospital, tests are run on Ellie. The doctor, Jerry Anderson, is certain that a vaccine can be manufactured. But to do that, the mutated fungus located in Ellie's brain needs to be extracted. If the doctor did that, Ellie would certainly die. Both Ellie and Joel don't know that the procedure will kill her. And only after MacLeod tells Joel that Ellie is going to die, he attempts to stop the Fireflies. He breaks into the operating room and kills every person that stands in his way to save Ellie, including MacLeod and Jerry Anderson. Joel manages to escape with Ellie from the hospital and finds refuge at a settlement, Jackson County, where his brother Tommy lives. As it turns out, Jerry Anderson was the only person who stood a plausible chance to produce a vaccine against the fungal infection. But now he's dead, and with him the biggest hope for overcoming the zombie apocalypse. Joel's decision to save Ellie and stop the Fireflies paved the ground for the story in The Last of Us Part 2. When the story of the sequel begins, several years have passed in which Joel and Ellie lived in Jackson County. But Abby, the daughter of Dr. Jerry Anderson, finally caught up with Joel and brutally murdered him in front of Ellie's eyes. After that, we have a typical revenge story with Ellie and her girlfriend Dinah as the protagonists. The decision to have Joel killed, however, led to a lot of outrage among fans of the franchise. They liked Joel and sympathized with his decision to save Ellie. But in this video, we want to be the party poopers. Joel is not a hero. Yep, there we said it. But to convince you of that, we need to ask whether Joel's decision to save Ellie can be morally justified in the first place. Luckily for us, the writers of the game made the different characters reflect on the morality of sacrificing Ellie for a vaccine. They hint at arguments for both sides of the dispute. But it seems that Joel's side has the clear burden of proof. After all, his decision might have destroyed one of the only hopes to a vaccine in a post-apocalyptic world riddled with zombies. Sure, some people have argued that there really cannot be a vaccine against fungus infection, and that it is unclear whether they would be able to manufacture one in a post-apocalyptic world. But let's ignore such problems for the sake of the moral discussion, shall we? After all, we're dealing with fiction here. So, what could possibly justify Joel's decision? We want to take a closer look at two considerations that the writers of the game present to us. A first argument that is made in defense of Joel's decision is alluded to by Tommy in the very first scene of Part 2 and by MacLeod at several points in both games. The argument builds on the close relationship that Joel and Ellie built during their dangerous journey through the country. When Joel told his brother what he did, Tommy was ambivalent. Even though he was clearly shocked at first, he also said that he would have likely done the same for a beloved person. Nonetheless, he suggests that Joel doesn't tell anyone else about what he did. So clearly, there's some understanding on the part of Tommy, but he still thinks that most people would react differently. At first, Marlene also showed understanding for Joel's unwillingness to sacrifice Ellie. When Jerry Anderson told Marlene that Ellie would have to die, she opposed the procedure. She asked Anderson if he would do the same if it was Abby, his own daughter, who would have to be sacrificed. So it seems immoral to demand of someone to sacrifice a person that they love. If that is so, can we really blame Joel for his decision to save Ellie's life? Yep, we can. Even if we accept that we have special obligations to our loved ones, the sheer number of people who are at stake cannot be simply ignored. After all, we're assuming here that Jerry Anderson would have been successful in making a vaccine that would have been able to prevent millions of people from ever contracting the fungal infection. This is also ultimately the argument Marlene makes when telling Joel that Ellie is going to be sacrificed. Marlene herself knew Ellie since she was born, and she even promised Ellie's mother, who died when Ellie was just a baby, to take care of her. Nonetheless, Marlene argued that this decision cannot be about herself nor about Ellie. It is about something bigger. It is about the prospect of saving millions. This justifies even sacrificing the people we love. Joel, of course, doesn't buy that and just says, "Yeah, you keep telling yourself that bullshit." But if we accept the assumption that the vaccine really could have been produced, the fact that Ellie was so close to Joel hardly justifies his actions. Marlene, who is immensely burdened by that decision as well, also accepts this. That's not to deny that we have special obligations to our loved ones. Whether or not this is true deserves its own video. But here, we know that the numbers far outweigh the moral importance of people close to us. In our estimation, the most powerful argument in defense of Joel's decision to save Ellie is that no one told either him or her in advance about the impact of the procedure. Sure, Jerry Anderson only found out after they ran tests on Ellie, but they nonetheless prepared her for surgery without telling her. During the heated discussion between Marlene and Anderson, the doctor asks, "How many fireflies have died for less?" To which Marlene immediately responds that it was the fireflies' own decision to sacrifice themselves for their cause. Ellie didn't subscribe to being sacrificed. It's hard to say whether Ellie would have consented to sacrifice herself. But at the end of the game, we learn that she certainly would have wanted to be sacrificed in retrospect. She blames Joel for having saved her and says that she cannot easily forgive him. Also, at least Abby Anderson emphatically said that she would have wanted her dad to sacrifice her for the sake of a vaccine. So we can't say for sure whether Ellie would have willingly sacrificed herself, but we know that Joel surely didn't agree. Based on that, we could try to make an argument in defense of his decision. Normally, we think that there is something morally fishy about sacrificing a person without her consent. Utilitarianism, however, the ethical theory that takes maximizing utility to be morally correct, would do so without batting an eye. But that is often said to be a problem for the theory. Imagine the following case. You go to the hospital for a routine checkup. The doctor, a secret utilitarian ethicist, sees that your blood type is compatible with that of 5 of his patients who wait for organs and will die in the next day if they don't receive an organ transplant. As it happens, all your organs would guarantee the other 5 people to survive. The doctor decides to sedate you without informing you and sacrifices your life in order to save his other 5 patients. If you're not a full-blown utilitarian, you will likely think that what the doctor in the thought experiment did is morally reprehensible. It is immoral to just harvest you without your consent, even if by doing so 5 people can be saved. Your rights or dignity, or however you want to phrase it, prevent such treatment from being morally justified. This is a strong case in defense of Joel's decision, at least if you agree with the judgment in the thought experiment. But if it really is wrong to sacrifice someone without their consent, then people in danger of being sacrificed should be allowed to defend themselves. Exactly like Joel did. So his decision can be justified, right? The argument is good, we think, but the problem again lies in the numbers. Only few people think that it's never right to sacrifice one person for the sake of others, even if the one person didn't consent. There's a huge literature on such problems in the philosophical debate. Is it justified to shoot down a plane with innocent passengers that is about to crash into a fully seated football stadium? Are drone attacks justified even though some civilian casualties cannot be excluded? Are you morally justified in torturing someone who knows where a bomb is hidden that will kill thousands? The answers for all these cases might vary, and there certainly is no consensus reached with regards to most of these problems in the philosophical debate. But very few will hold that we can never justify sacrificing people without their consent, especially if we can thereby save millions. And if that's the case, Joel's moral integrity is in deep trouble. He's not a hero. What do you think? Can Joel's decision be justified? We only covered the arguments that were mentioned by characters in the game, so let us know your own ideas in the comments below. As always, there is a lot more to say about these philosophical questions. If you liked this video, we would like you to leave us a like. Also, subscribe please. Thanks for watching and until next time.